Hello, world. Welcome to Africa. Let's talk. My name is Collins Kofi Opon. You can always call me Mr. Beyond. Tonight, we are having a conversation on important dementia education for the African community. We are looking at the risk factors. We're also looking at the burden as well as management of dementia within the African community. So please, if you join the conversation, share to invite people because this has become a critical situation within the African community. And that is why we are having this conversation. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who was telling me that a close friend told him a while ago that he promised his wife a good lovemaking session. He went watching TV and he forgot about it. The next morning, the wife said, "What happened?" He said, "Oh, I forgot." We don't want it to be in this situation. And that was just for a joke. But hey, this is a serious conversation about dementia within the African community. And like I said, this community broadcast actually is a follow-up conversation after the initial broadcast that discussed the findings of the dementia project in the African community. Today's broadcast is done in partnership with the Immigrant Memory Collaborative, as well as the African Career Education and Resources, ACER and Africa. Let's talk. Like I mentioned, my name is Collins Kofi Opon. I'm your host, and my guest tonight is Manka Nkemben. She is the Assistant Professor, Division of Health Policy and Management at the University of Minnesota School of Public Health. And of course, participants who are joining the conversation today, please, you have a chance to actually get for yourself a $25 gift card. All you have to do is to answer the before and after surveys that will be put in the comments link or in the comment box. So before you fill the form to tell us your feedback on before this education, and then after the conversation, you fill the form to tell us your feedback, and you stand a chance to win the gift card. I am bringing in my guest today, like I mentioned, Manka Nkemben. Good to have you back again whilst we talk about education on dementia within the African community, the risk factors, the burden, and management. You are welcome once again.
Thank you so much, Mr. Beyond, for having me, and thank you for bringing me back after our last conversation. I really enjoyed our time, so thank you.
Very much. You are very welcome. And of course, we are delving right into the conversation. So we want to know, per your experience, you have so much experience working in our community with regards to dementia situations, per your experience with the community and the findings of the dementia project. We want to know from you, what will you say actually comes to the mind of people when they hear the word dementia? Can you share with us?
That's a very interesting question, especially for the African immigrant community. And that is because a lot of people would tell you that they don't know the word dementia, they had never heard about the word dementia. And many people that I've spoken to in the community say, when I was back home in Africa, I never heard that word until I came to the United States and I started working in a health-related job as a nurse, medical assistant before I heard the word. And so, if we're thinking about a condition that is wreaking havoc basically in the community because it costs a lot of money and it costs a lot of time and energy, and people do not even know the word or have never heard the word, not to talk of the symptoms. So, it's a big deal. People really either just know the name and don't know anything about it, or many people do not know the name. So,
wow. That is interesting, especially with regards to your experience talking to people about dementia. If you join the conversation, my name is Collins Kofi Opon. My guest today in the night is Manka Nkemben. And of course, we are talking about dementia education for the African community. We're looking at the risk factors, we're looking at the burden, as well as management of this particular situation or instance within our community. Please, we want you to share the video and invite your friends to be part of this conversation. Of course, what is the situation with regards to knowledge, the attitudes, and of course, practices of African immigrants like ourselves in relation to dementia? What has been the situation with regards to these factors?
So, like I was alluding to earlier, the biggest thing is that people do not know about it. If you do not know the name, chances are you do not know what it is and how it presents itself. And that's exactly what we found in the memory loss project that we did. And so we found out that we used what's called a dementia knowledge survey. This is a survey that only has about 25 questions, and it's really kind of what we in the field are calling basic knowledge around dementia. So those 25 questions, kind of what is dementia, what are the risk factors, how do you manage it, how do you communicate with a person. And out of those 25 questions, we found out that the average person in our sample could only answer about 14 of them correctly. And
Wow.
that is worrisome, because if you cannot really know the basic information about dementia, how are you going to pick it up when a mom, a dad, a relative has it? And how are you then going to get them to go get the care that they need? So it's really troubling that there's really no, very limited knowledge about dementia in the community. And also, there's so many other barriers and challenges that affecting kind of our knowledge and also just accessing care in the community. And so those barriers and challenges are really compounding the effect of this limited knowledge in the community. Yeah.
Wow, that is interesting. That is even why this education and creating awareness about dementia, memory loss in our community is so very important. At this point, we want to share with us the process involved in the diagnosis and management of dementia. So what happens? Like today, actually coming to the show, I forgot how to put on a tie. For some reason, I had to try different ties. And then finally, I went for the one that has already been tied. Is it a process that do I need to worry? But of course, how is the process like in terms of the diagnosis and management of dementia?
So basically, what happens is that you often start presenting with the symptoms. And so, in thinking about the symptoms, like you've mentioned, one of them, which is a memory loss, is the most common thing that people present with. And that's one of them. But I'm going to talk about quite a few of them. And so, if you think of memory loss, it's not necessarily just what you've talked about with forgetting about your tie, but it's this memory loss that you forget something that's affecting your health. So in
Mm,
every day, we can forget where we put our keys, but a couple of hours after, you're going to remember that you place your keys on the couch or somewhere and you go get them. But
mhm,
in somebody who's presenting with dementia or a form of dementia, what happens is that they have such severe memory loss that they're forgetting things. You find out that people are cooking and they put salt and they forget that they put salt and they add salt again. So that's
mm,
one of the symptoms. Then the other symptom is that people begin to have difficulty doing things that they normally do. So it'll be they were bathing, showering, they completely do not know how to do it. Or
wow.
they're having disorientation with time and place. This is a place like a grocery store that they used to go to every day, but
Mhm,
now they no longer have an idea where that grocery store is. Or they're just losing their things related to the forgetfulness and just disorientation. It's like those things are now compounding and they're just misplacing things here and there. You find out these people are writing checks, forgetting that they wrote a check, write it again, giving money to people, forgetting that they gave them money and doing it again. You have them not being able to make judgments. So it's something
mhm,
that, let's say somebody could think, had a moral compass to say something was wrong, then soon they start having problems to saying that the very same thing that you knew them all along their life course, saying that, oh, this is something that they consider wrong. Now they're
mhm,
like, oh, this is fine. You can do this. You can do this. You find people now
mm,
being more lenient and kind of going against their own values and beliefs because their judgment now is really decreased and their values and their morals and the things that they used to think about and believe in are changing because their judgment is affected. Again, their mood also starts changing. This is somebody that used to be kind of even keel, low key, not too angry, not too irritated. You see that their mood starts changing. They're either getting very agitated quickly, they're getting angry, their mood just starts changing from back and forth. And then
mm,
another sign is that the language it's affected. And so it's you often find that people when they're talking, they begin to misplace words and they use like words that describe it, but not necessarily the the exact same word. Say if somebody's talking about go get me a spoon, they might forget spoon. Then they say, go get me that thing that you used to eat with. But you know that that's somebody who used to know what a spoon is, but the dementia has affected their language in such a way that they cannot really think about what the word is that they're using. Excuse me. And then they're having difficulty with spatial relationships where if they're going down the steps, they're misjudging how long the stair is, and so they're tripping and falling. And so these are like really some of the symptoms that often present themselves. And so I know the question he asked me was the process of getting diagnosed, or the
Mm-hmm.
process of getting really understanding what this disease is. So when you start seeing those symptoms, we recommend go straight to your medical practitioner, go to your primary care doctor. As soon as you go to your primary care doctor, they start by doing some tests. Most of them will start by doing neurocognitive testing, which is
Mm-hmm.
called done primarily by neuropsychologists or neurologists. They'll start by doing that test. And after that, they might even involve other practitioners, neurologists, radiologists, and then they would also do different types of tests. So providers might run blood tests, providers might do MRI, providers might do different kind of imaging studies to see what is happening. And again, we're going to come to it, but really what dementia is, it's a problem with the brain. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why we're doing all of this testing, because in that process of diagnosis, what the doctor wants to tell is this something that just is happening at random, or is happening because of a different reason, or there's really a change in the brain that could be related to dementia or cognitive impairment. And so
Mm.
once you get that diagnosis, from the time you see symptoms to getting diagnosis, depending on where you are in the country, in the US, it takes some time. For some people, it could take several months. Unfortunately, for some people, it can take years, depending on the number of different types of providers in your area. So basically, my plea to everyone listening is that if you begin seeing symptoms, get
Mm-hmm.
in to the doctor immediately, because the
Immediately.
process takes time. You want
The
to
process takes time.
see
Mm.
memory loss, see disorientation, poor decreased judgment, trouble with spatial relationships, all of those things. Book an appointment with a primary care doctor to go get diagnosed. Yeah.
Wow, indeed, you can keep your comments coming in. And as Narrative says, this is serious. Yes, this is serious. And unfortunately, we have overlooked it for far too long. But the timing is right for us to talk about it and seek help when necessary. And of course, the next thing I would like to find out from you is that in our community, the African community, there have always been several myths and disbeliefs about the issue of dementia. And we want you to actually share some of these myths with us. Of course, I had myths about it. I thought this has something to do with witchcraft, like why they forgetting everything, but especially among old people. So, can you throw some light on these myths, and let's talk about these misbeliefs as well?
You're right. Witchcraft is one of the ones that often comes up. There's a lot of myths, and that's part of the reason why it's really challenging for us in the
Mm-hmm.
African immigrant community to get ahead of this condition. So the biggest myth, or one of them, is the witchcraft. It's witchcraft. They've been cursed. The person did a lot of hard drugs. The
Mm-hmm.
person is just getting old. Oh, it's normal. It's not
Mm.
necessarily a myth, but some people just believe that all of what I've described as the signs and symptoms are normal. And I'm here to say that all of those symptoms that I've described, there are some age-related changes that could happen with some slowness and some difficulty in many of those domains that I've talked about. But when it starts affecting the way you function and the way you do everyday things, that is not normal. So dementia is not a normal part of aging. Dementia is a medical problem and is serious. So one of the things that people often think about is that it's normal, or the hard drugs, or some people have said that they're trying to eradicate the black race, and that's why things like this are happening and are being diagnosed in the community. No, this is a medical condition and it's not normal. The other one that I've heard a lot about from both primarily Christians and Muslims is that it's God's will or it's Allah's will, and so that's what is happening to me.
Mm.
Again, these are medical problems that, if diagnosed, there can be treatment, especially if diagnosed early. We can get it treated, and the person might be able to live a manageable life with the support of family and friends.
Well, once again, this is African Let's Talk. We're talking about dementia education for the African community. We're looking at the risk factors, we're looking at the burden and the management. Of course, if you have any experiences with dementia, especially with a family person or a family member or a friend or somebody that you know, please, you can share with us. If you have any questions whilst this conversation is ongoing, you are more than welcome to leave them in the comment box and we would talk about them. And of course, at this moment, we want you to know that if you are watching, and I'm just going to put it right away in the comment box, there are 2 surveys that you can take. The first one is before the conversation and the second one is after the conversation. So you click on it and you fill the form. And then when you're done with that, we'll reach back to you and we'll give you $25 gift card for doing that. So it's a short survey, learning about what you understand about dementia and other questions before this conversation and then after the conversation. So you can do the before one actually now. Then when we are done with the conversation, you can do the after one as well. Of course, at this point, we want to talk about the known factors that cause dementia in people, because sometimes when we are educated about the causes, the factors, then we would be able to stay away from them. So please, can you share with us, educate us about the known factors that cause dementia in people, especially within the African community?
Sure. So basically, we've been talking about dementia. So let's really get into what exactly is dementia. And so dementia is an umbrella term for a few medical conditions that lead to, or a few symptoms that are related to cognitive impairment. And what is the cause of that cognitive impairment is the question that you really ask. And so dementia is the loss of brain cells in the brain. And so what happens is that depending on the type of dementia and also on where the loss of brain cells or the brain cell damage is happening in the brain, then you will get the symptoms. So if the brain cell damages happens where in the brain is related to your speech, then your speech is affected. If it's related to judgment and how you see things, then your judgment is affected. And so if we look at the image on the screen, that is an image of a brain of somebody who has Alzheimer's. So on the left-hand side, we see the normal brain, and there's 2 images. One of them is a slice and one of them is the full brain. So on the left-hand image, looking on the left hand of that, you see a normal brain, how it's full and there's no brain cell damage. But when you look at the Alzheimer's brain that is sliced on the right, you see how there's been a lot of damage and brain cell dead. And so the brain has shrunk. And so now we're looking at that, and the problem is happening at the memory and language stage. So that person who has that brain will be presenting with symptoms that are related to their memory and language. And as the condition progresses, then you start losing a lot of brain cells, and then more and more areas of the brain are affected. That is why, again, it's very critical that as soon as you start seeing symptoms, you really want to go in and go get diagnosed, because there might be medications that you can take that can begin to slow down the cell death, or there might be even things that you need to do to make sure that your family knows your wishes and your goals before you lose more brain function. So if you think about it, as the disease progresses, evidence is showing that people can live up to 20 plus years with the disease. And so you really want to make sure that as soon as you know that you have dementia, you start putting a plan in place so that you know what you want, you make your wishes known to your family, and everyone is aware. Because as you lose more and more brain cells, as you lose more and more function in the brain, then you're no longer really able to be there and make decisions and do the things that you need to do. What happens in the worst cases of dementia and the really later stages, that you're not even able to bathe, you're not able to stand. Some people are bedridden completely. So if you know,
so they forget to do all of these activities.
yes, yeah.
Wow.
The brain function is so bad that you're no longer able to do any of those things. Yeah.
This is interesting. Please, if you have any questions, you have any feedback, you are more than welcome to please leave them in the comment box and we would ask these questions. But in the meantime, please, the survey links are posted, so you can click on them and fill the before education survey. And when we are done with this education, you can also go ahead and fill the after education survey. At this point, what we would like to find out is the risk factors, or the factors that increases the risk of dementia, because we want to stay away from being affected, especially those who are not yet diagnosed or who have not been diagnosed with it. Can you share the risk factors that we need to be aware of?
Sure. So there are two types of buckets of risk factors that we like to think about. The good news is that the first bucket is the things that we really cannot change about ourselves. We find that dementia happens in people as you get older. Unfortunately, we cannot change the process of aging as we get older. That happens naturally. And the other thing is that there are some families that have a family history of dementia. Again, you cannot change your family.
So it's
But
genetics.
yeah,
Wow.
the good news is that that is just putting you at risk for it does not mean you're going to get it, because if you look at the right hand side of that image, there's a lot of things that are things that we can modify. So thinking about heart disease and other heart disease risk factors, so your high cholesterol, you can do something. Obesity, you can do something. Diabetes, you can do something. Depression, we can manage that. Hypertension, we can do something. So all of those conditions that are risk factors for heart disease are also risk factors for dementia. In fact, a type of dementia, which is vascular dementia, is really related to a lot of hypertension and high blood pressure. So again, those modifiable risk factors, the last one on the screen that I haven't talked about is brain injury or traumatic brain injury. Again, we can potentially do something. Wearing helmets while riding bikes, wearing helmets while walking, playing sports that have high intensity on the brain. All of those things are really things that we have control over, which is one of the encouraging things that I want to let people know, that if from today you can start doing something about your potential risk for dementia and all of those things. I think we've heard about most of those things before, so it's not something that is new to us. We can really work on our risk for dementia. Yeah.
Wow, indeed. It's great to know that these are the risk factors. These are the factors that can actually make the situation worse. So then we can do something. I'm happy for the ones that can be modified. At this point, we want to know when somebody is affected, the kind of roles that families and people close to them can play. So please, can you share light on the role that families are expected to play as they care for someone living with dementia?
Sure. I think this is the place which is really important for us as Africans and the African community. I think we're very family oriented. Our families are very involved in everything we do. Our families, especially our grandparents who are at risk for dementia, are kind of like really central and important to us. Family, parents, and grandparents are the people who hold history, who carry and transmit knowledge from generations to generations. So family is very, very, very critical in dementia care, because they provide really the majority of care for dementia. So if you're thinking about a relative that has dementia, they go to the doctor's appointment maybe once or twice a week. If that's a lot, actually, most people it's maybe once or twice a month. And the rest of the times they're at home with the family, or if the condition is so bad, they might be in an assisted living or different kind of setting where they need a lot of care. But when they're at home, who's involved? The family. So the family member is the person that is really integral to the care of that person living with dementia. And so they're providing all of the care that is needed. Family members have been known to provide care such as helping them with medications, helping them cook, helping them bathe, depending on what their needs are, and really helping take them to the doctor's offices, bring them back, and really everything that they need. And family members might be involved in planning end of life things, making sure that their wishes are written down and documented. They might be involved in making sure that their wills are done and all of those good things. So families are really central and critical. In fact, a lot of the dementia work and the dementia providers would always be looking for a family member to come with a person living with dementia when they come to an appointment. And so in the medical literature, we often call them the caregiver, which is also something that we found that a lot of Africans did not identify themselves as caregivers. So that is something that was interesting, because we in the medical literature will call that family member who's going in with a person with dementia as a caregiver. But a lot of Africans would just consider themselves in the relationship. So if I'm going in with my mom, I brought mom to an appointment and I'm not mom's caregiver. But just
Mm.
so you know that that might be a term that a doctor might refer to you when you're bringing in a relative into
Yeah.
the care system. And then the newer terminology that is actually used now is called care partner, because
Care
we're
partner.
realizing that, yeah,
Mhm.
you really are not giving them care, you're just partnering with them to care for
Mhm.
themselves. And so that's the newer terminology that we're using. Again, those two things are not necessarily what we Africans think about. And so I just encourage everyone listening to pay attention, because even though you're not using that term, that's what people are going to think you are, and that's what people are going to refer to you as. So it's important that you know it and recognize it, because they might be telling you information and referring to you in that way and giving you important information for your relative, but you don't think of yourself in that way. So
Wow, that's great, and thanks so much for sharing and throwing lights on some of the things, the roles that family play, especially when they're living with somebody with dementia. And of course, when it comes to caregiving, there's also the part about caregiver fatigue. Uh, it gets frustrating. I can imagine for people who have to care for people living, or maybe older people living with dementia. Can you actually talk briefly about this and educate us on caregiver fatigue, as well as you also mentioned even end of life planning for people affected? If you can actually touch briefly on those two aspects.
yeah, it's one of the things that, again, as I mentioned, that we're family oriented and we want to take care of our family members. People start providing care to the person that is living with dementia, and at times they forget about who they are as a person and themselves. And so it's really important that you, as a person who's providing care to someone living with dementia, are also paying attention to yourself and who you are.
Mm.
So I'm going to talk about some signs of stress and burnout. If you
Mhm.
are providing care for a relative living with dementia, begin to find out that your eating patterns are changing. You know, you're now eating very unhealthily. Pay attention and think about what is happening. Is it that you don't have enough time to be able to cook the food that you need to cook? Or you find that you're gaining a lot of weight. You find that you're not sleeping well, you're not sleeping enough hours. You find that you're just getting very tired and just, feeling unhappy, or your mood is changing. You're feeling really stressed and irritated. And then you're also maybe beginning to lose your own personality and self. You're no longer going out and hanging out with your friends as you used to. You're now just staying in the house, only providing caregiving and not doing any of the things that you used to do. You used to enjoy work, you used to enjoy going to meetings, you used to enjoy having coffee or tea with your friends. You're not doing any of those things. Or you're finding out that, oh my God, I'm not doing any of the things that I used to do for myself. I am forgetting my doctor's appointments. I'm not going to them. Those are some signs that you, as a care partner or as a caregiver or as a family member taking care of someone with dementia, are really getting burnout. And it's
Wow.
really important that you pay attention to yourself as well.
That is great, and I'm happy you actually mentioned this, because sometimes when life gets in the way, especially caring for somebody living with dementia, then we are beginning to experience all of these things, but we may not necessarily pay attention to them. So yeah, I'm really happy that you touched on these very important parts of stress and burnouts, and people have to take care of these situations, especially as and when they realize it. At this point, we want to talk about. The exploring the fundamentals of issues with the dementia. We also want to talk about the current burden of dementia, actually in relation to direct cost, in relation to projections, and of course ethnicity. Um, is there a burden in how the situation is being handled, especially on a large scale?
Oh, yeah, dementia is huge. There's a lot of people living with dementia. I think it's estimated that there's about 5+ million people living with dementia. Like we
Mm.
mentioned, it's higher in people who are older. I mentioned that one of the risk factors was older age. So it's documented that 1 in 10 people who's over the age of 65 has dementia.
Wow.
Unfortunately, dementia is more prevalent in women than in men. But again,
Mm.
you cannot change your gender now, but you can do all of the work to get engaged, modify or work on all of the modifiable risk factors: diabetes, hypertension, obesity. There's 3 things you can do. You cannot change your age, you cannot change your gender, but you can change your diabetes, you can change your hypertension, you can manage your depression, you can prevent traumatic brain injuries. All of those things you can control. And so it is documented that dementia is costing us a lot of money. The estimate that is costing about $290 billion in healthcare.
Wow.
So again, it costs a lot of money for the medical society, and it costs a lot of money and time and energy for the person living with dementia and also the person that is providing care. And then why it's one of very important to me as an individual and as an immigrant is that dementia is more prevalent in Black persons. So persons that are Black have double the risk of dementia, and persons that are Hispanic have 1.5 times compared to non-Hispanic whites in the United States. Sadly, those people who are at greater risk are the fewest people to get diagnosed. We often get to a diagnosis very, very late. And by the time you're getting diagnosis late, that means that you're gonna need a lot more medical care. Again, like I mentioned when I was talking about the signs and symptoms, if you start seeing any of the signs and symptoms, go to the doctor, go get a diagnosis and know what you're dealing with so that we can then begin the process of treatment. There is no cure for dementia currently. I mean, the scientists, I read papers every day. They are working on it, hands and feet, and every day, 24/7. There's a lot of work being done about how we can cure dementia. But currently, there is no cure, but there is treatment. And there's different medications that can modify symptoms. There's different behavioral interventions that we can do with the person living with dementia, but with the care partner to make sure that the person who has dementia is living as best of a life as they can be. And all of that needs us to be able to go in and go get diagnosed so that we can begin thinking about a treatment and management plan.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, looking at the charts, looking and knowing that among Africans and Blacks especially, we have 2 times chances of developing dementia or being affected as compared to 1.5 for Hispanics. And the white is like, what does that explain in the among the white population?
So basically, all of those numbers are compared to white. So compared to a white person, a Black person has double the risk. Compared to an Hispanic, compared to a white person, a Hispanic or Latino person has 1.5 times the risk. So it just means
So
that.
are there any specific reason, especially for the reasons for the Black community? Why are we double the risk?
So I mean, there's nothing that could say this is exactly why. There's only things that we as researchers are suspecting that is why. So if we think about many of the risk factors that we've mentioned, diabetes, hypertension, obesity, um, and all of those other cardiovascular disease risk factors, they are also higher in racial and ethnic minority communities. And so that's one of the things. And then the other thing that we've been talking about, and there's been a lot of research, is the role of racism in all of this. And interestingly, racism is also related to all of those cardiovascular disease risk factors that I've also mentioned. So racism is related to high rates of hypertension, related to higher rates of diabetes. And so the role of racism and how it's affecting the health of the racial and ethnic minority community is something that we're really beginning to explore. Not only the interpersonal racism, which is what is happening when you engage somebody who is being racist against you, but also the systems and the structures that have been in place and how those are affecting the health of racial and ethnic minority communities. So this is a big research topic that a lot of us are now looking at to really begin to think about how does structural racism really affect health outcomes for racial and ethnic minority communities. Because for the longest time, we've been looking at the interpersonal piece of racism, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that it might be following a psychophysiological pathway where racism, especially the interpersonal racism, and when I talk about interpersonal racism, I mean like you come across somebody who says something to you, either calls you the N word or something. So that kind
Mm-hmm.
of interpersonal racism, if you think about it, it really can really cause you to get angry, cause you to
Mm-hmm.
get stressed. And so as you get stressed and you're angry, then your cortisol level is elevated, and high levels of constantly high levels of cortisol in your system are not good, because they've been tied again with all of the medical conditions that
Wow.
I've named. And so that's one of the things that we're thinking, that the interpersonal racism is playing a role. But the
Wow.
structural piece is one of the things that we're really now beginning to look at, to see how structural racism in particular really
Hmm.
affects health outcomes for a lot of racial and ethnic minority communities. I mean, sorry, I just thought of a couple of things that I saw not too long ago. So if you think
Mm-hmm.
about structural racism, it also limits access. So if you're not
Mm-hmm.
able to access things, access
Yeah.
programs, access places, then that those are structures that are
Mm.
limiting access to resources. So that is one of the ways that is playing out, but there's a lot more that we're still teasing out as researchers.
Indeed. Wow, this is great. And of course, Glory House International Church says great discussion. And again, we are learning a lot, especially the fact that Black folks and Africans are more affected. And we need to look at the factors. We need to look at, okay, how then do we take care of certain things that we can? There's some things that we can actually help, and there's some things that we rely on leaders to put in the right policies and measures to help. And of course, we want to also entrust these things into people like you to champion the causes for us at the level where we can actually champion changes in policies that can help us. Of course, at this point, and what we want to know about is that. And if we have the time, if not, we can move on. But we want to know, how does the information that we just talked about relate to the situation here in Minnesota? If we want to kind of zero in to what happens in Minnesota, how does it correlate with the situation in Minnesota?
So basically, the story is the same.
Mm.
So for Minnesota, there were about 90,000 cases of Alzheimer's disease related dementia
Mm-hmm.
in 2020. And that number is going to go up to about 120,000. That's a steep increase. And
Wow.
so the moral of the story is that the burden of dementia is growing regardless of where you are in the country and even in the world. The burden of dementia, there's been a few studies that have been done in Nigeria, South Africa, and other African countries. We're now finding dementia in many of the African countries. For those of you who are Nigerian movie fans, there was an article, story that just came out about a movie actor, Ulu Jacobs, and him having dementia.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
so there is dementia that is happening both back home and here, and it's growing again because some of those risk factors that we've talked about is growing. So the
Mm-hmm.
moral of the story is that we really need to do the work to begin preventing it. And then I wanted to touch on something that you brought up, and I don't think I completely answered it. I think you asked me about end of life care.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
please. We can
I
touch on
cannot
that.
stress enough about the importance of us as a community thinking about end of life care. I know, thinking about the myths and some of the beliefs and attitudes that we have in the community, most of us do not like to talk about death.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us do not want to think about what will be happening when we're dying. We just want to let it go. But in a condition such as dementia, that's not a good idea. And again, just in general in life, it's not good not to have an end of life plan. So make
Mm.
sure that your wishes are documented and people know. Your primary care doctor knows, your children know, your husband knows, your sister knows, everybody knows, so that when it comes time for those decisions to be made, we already know your wishes. So
Mm-hmm.
end of life is really sitting down with a doctor and a provider and thinking about, would you want all kinds of measures done? Would you want CPR? Would you want all of those things done? Especially for someone with dementia, it's good to have that conversation when you're still cognitively aware of yourself and who you are as a person, to make those decisions, because as you progress in the disease, as we've talked about, you're no longer able to really think and remember who you are as a person and what your wishes are. But if you had them documented, then your care partner, your family member only just goes and pulls that document and says, Mom had said that if this happens, this is what they would want done. Dad
Mm.
had said, my husband had said, my sister had said, it makes life so, so much easy for your relatives because they know exactly what you want and what you prefer. And so at that time, they're only really just doing the work to mourn you and celebrate your life as your loved one and not stressing about, oh my God, am I going to make the right decision for mom? So it's very end of life care is very, very important for us to think about, not only in the context of dementia, but especially in the context of dementia. Plan ahead, think
Plan
about
ahead.
it, make legal decisions, make your will. All of those things are part of that planning that happens. Who's going to take all your money in your bank account? Who's going to take the house? Who's going to do what? Have those conversations, document them, and make sure the person who needs to know knows them.
Knows them. Wow, it's interesting. So when you actually mentioned Olu Jacobs, a very vibrant actor in his days and now, so and he lost a lot of weight. Did the dementia play any role in that?
So, again, like I mentioned, as dementia progresses, you begin to see that diet, eating. Does he still remember how to eat? Does he still like the taste of food? Is he even eating as much as he could eat? Is he forgetting to eat? So there's all of those things, and losing weight could be something that comes with a progression of dementia because of all of the things that I'm talking about. As the brain changes, again, appetite is going, taste is going, all of those things that are related to food. Does the food look appetizing to him anymore? So the brain does a lot for us that we normally do not think about. It's only until you start losing some of those functions that you begin to think about, oh, this is what my brain was doing. So the brain is critical, and with dementia, as it progresses, you begin to lose more and more brain function, more and more symptoms begin to show, and so they begin to affect more and more domains of life. And so weight loss and poor appetite and all of those things happen can happen later in the disease process. Yeah.
In the disease process. And of course, as Africans, I know there are a lot of areas we take care of, our spiritual needs, our physical needs. But one need, which even according to this conversation is very important, is our mind, our brain. How are we keeping it fit? Of course, at this point, we people will be wondering, okay, how then can they actually keep their minds fit? How can I keep this mind fit? And of course, keep it as strong as possible to at least delay the process of dementia or even to avoid it altogether or to manage the situation. In what way can we keep the brain fit? Can you please help us with this education?
Sure. Sorry, I was too excited to talk about that because that's the whole point of I don't want to scare people because I know that there's a lot that we can do. And it
Yes.
really just means start today. Don't wait.
Today, let me
Start
mention
today.
today. Today is December 7th. Please, everybody,
Yes, start
start
today.
today.
Yeah.
Yes.
All of the ways that I know the people have done a lot of talking about loving your heart. Loving your heart also means loving your brain. So all of the things that you can do for heart health help your brain too. Exercise, exercise. So when I talk about exercise, if you can sign up for a gym membership, good. If you can go out and walk and you're not in Minnesota where it's too cold, good. Or if you can go out and bundle up and walk in the cold safely, that's good. But if not, exercise in your house. How many stairs do you have? Walk up and down those stairs for 30 minutes continuously. Run up and down those stairs. Are you cooking? Stand up to cook instead of sitting to do things. Exercise and being active, critical. And there's so many ways to exercise. Gone are those days when people will only think that we can do it in the gym or we can do it in specific places. You can exercise any and everywhere. Continuous exercise. Sleep well. A lot of us do not sleep. Make sure that we're getting enough sleep. The the doctors have a recommended, I think they say you should get over 7+ hours of sleep a night. Very, very important. Sound sleep, not sleeping in a lot of noise, quiet, dark room, because again, sleep time is when your brain is resting and the cells are growing and regenerating. You want that to happen to you. You want to learn a new skill, which is exercising the brain, learning a new skill, doing Sudoku, doing all of those mentally stimulating work. Again, another aspect of doing mentally stimulating work is going out with your friends, having social gatherings, having your social network around you. Do you have a group of guy friends that you go out and go drink coffee? Do that. but make sure that you're doing things that are healthy. Don't go out and go eat and then don't exercise, but engaging your friend group and your social networks. Now, in the days of Zoom and WhatsApp, you can
Hmm.
also do it, across the internet. Or I know group of men who go out and play soccer. That's your social network. That's also their physical activity. So doing all of those things, again, just doing all of the things that we need to do for our heart and mental health. Resting,
Wow.
eating well. Eating well is one of those things that a lot of people do not think about. One of the biggest recommendations I tell people is that, couple of things: eat as close to its natural form as it comes. So if we think of something like potatoes, stay away from potato chips because potatoes does not come as potato chips. Eat organic potatoes that are boiled or baked. So that's as close to its natural form as it can, because when the potatoes comes from the ground, you're boiling it, that's really close to its nature. By the time
Mm-hmm.
it starts getting to mashed and baked, mashed and fried and all of those other unhealthy ways,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily good. Eat variety. Make sure that when you're eating, your plate almost looks like a rainbow. You're eating white foods, you're eating brown, you're eating greens, you're eating veggies, you're eating all of these things, fruit. Diversity in what you eat is very, very important. Different fruits and foods have different nutrients and minerals. So you want to eat that variety so that you're getting the diversity of minerals that you need, in addition to exercise and maintaining your brain. So those are some of the ways to keep your mind fit. Yeah.
Wow, this is great. And I know most of Africans, we are always guilty for these kind of topics because we are just used to doing certain things in a certain way. Oh, this is how we eat. A lot of carbohydrates and a lot of meat and nothing else. And it doesn't help the brain, especially me. I mean, I just realized a few months ago that my eating habit wasn't right. I was eating lots of high density carbohydrates and meat. Now I said, no, I mean, I don't want a situation where I'm done eating and I feel tired. I can move my body. Like, no, you are eating to be energized. So I said, yeah, I'm cutting down carbohydrates. I'm cutting down a lot of meat. And I see a lot of improvement. So please, and I'm happy you mentioned this because we have often taken it for granted. All of us learned something about balanced diet right from primary school, but we just took it for granted. Oh, a balanced diet. We just use it for exams. But I'm happy it's one of the major things that you talked about. And of course, doing activities that help the brain. Let's move the body. Let's get out there and move the body. Because the body is meant to be moved. Everything in the body, especially our mind and brain, needs to be moved. And so thankful that you are bringing this conversation and education to our people. Of course, we are running out of time. But before I let it go, we want to know any available resources for people who are affected by dementia and for families that are also caring for the affected individuals. So, yes, you've talked about what we can do to manage the situation and keep our brains fit, but then also what are resources available for people that need them most.
So there are a lot of resources. Oftentimes I say start with your doctor's office. So
Mm,
go to your doctor's office and tell them exactly what you're facing and what you're struggling with as the person living with dementia or as the person caring for a person living with dementia. The doctor's office should be able to point you to the various resources that are available, and social work, assisted living, adult day programs, all of those might be available as the
mhm,
providers. The other good place to go for resources is the Alzheimer's Association hotline. So
mhm,
the Alzheimer's Association hotline, basically, if you call them, they would ask you where you are, ask you what kind of resources you think you might need or what problems you're facing, and then give you a list of resources that are related to that problem. And so that's one of the biggest resource that a lot of people tap into. And then for those who are in Minnesota, the Volunteers of America have a culturally responsive caregiver support group. And I think this is one of the things that a lot of people do not think about, that it might be nice that to go to a place where you're talking to other care partners or other family members that are providing care with a relative living with dementia. They might have some tips on how they're doing things. They might just listen to you. You might need someone who shares your experience to listen to you and just affirm that, oh, this is also what is happening in our situation. So if you're in Minnesota, that caregiver support group, it's culturally responsive. They have African immigrants, they have different racial and ethnic minority groups, they have different languages that we Africans speak. So contact that support group helpline, and they're very, very good, and they can help, especially the care partners or the caregivers of persons living with dementia. But then also the Alzheimer's Association helpline, very, very good to tell you whatever local resources are available. They're a national organization, but they'll find out whatever resources are in your zip code and let you know.
To let you know. Thank you so very much. Of course, there's a question that came in privately to me, and the person says, great discussion and insightful statistics, but why are there less Black cases in the healthcare sector and memory care units? And I don't know about this question. I don't know the statistics, but is that a situation that is prevailing? Is this actually a situation that is prevailing?
So yes, and
Oh,
it's twofold. The very first part of it is what a little bit of what I was talking about. A lot of the Black community, I think this includes even the African Americans, we prefer family type of care. So care happening with family within the home. So the family members do their very best to provide care in the home for that person living with dementia. So oftentimes you don't find a lot of them out in kind of the memory care units and all of the facilities that we see out there, and that's because there's a traditional family care. So that's the good aspect of that question. The bad aspect of that question is the fear and the stigma that leads to keeping that person at home so that people do not know while they need that level of care, but you're not taking them out of the home because you're trying to hide it. So there's a good side to that, there's a bad side to that. Our recommendation as researchers, and I'm a nurse as well as providers, is that really begin to think of the care situation that you're facing with your family member. Can I realistically provide the best care in the home setting? Do I have the resources to be able to bring into that setting to provide care for my relative? If your answer is yes, then do that. If the answer is no, please take your relative to a place where they can get the care that they need. And I know that I mentioned getting your relative to a place that they can get the care they need. And I know that many of these facilities are not culturally sensitive yet, but some of them are doing a lot of the work to make sure that they're providing culturally relevant care to the persons that are not traditionally white, because most of them were created and built, and their programming has been tailored around the white people who used to make up the majority. But as we get into those facilities, the services are going to be changing. But I just urge people to make sure that you're providing the best level of care that you can provide to your relative, while also you as a person, the care partner or the family member, thinking about yourself, because that's the other piece. If the person is at home and you cannot sleep because you're afraid that they might wake up and do something and burn down the house, none of you are getting anything that you need, because it's really a dynamic process that you really want to think about it as a family and just decide what is the best decision in this circumstance for everyone involved.
Wow, that's interesting. Of course, before the conversation, I told you that, oh no, we're going to just keep it 30 minutes. And because it's so exciting with a lot of great information and education, and we extended it, and for just good reason. So thank you so very much for your time. And I truly appreciate it. Before I let you go, any closing remarks?
So
okay.
thank you.
So actually, the question just came in. So probably we can do that. Then you can bring your closing remarks. Is there any link between memory loss and suicide?
To my knowledge, I have not seen any links between memory loss and suicidal ideation, but there's a link between depression and dementia. And so, again, what we as a community and as family need to look out for people who are experiencing depression, look out for them, because again, several of the people who end up committing suicide or having suicidal attempts are persons who are depressed. So we want to make sure that we're looking out for each other. There's a hotline. I don't have that number with me, but if you just Google the crisis hotline number, if you have a relative that you're suspecting that the person is suffering from depression, help them see a doctor, help them see a psychiatrist, help them see their primary care doctor. But there is a link, and depression is one of the risk factors for dementia. So
wow. All right. Thanks so much. And of course, if you can give us your closing remarks as far as the topic today, dementia education for the African community, the risk factors, burden, and of course, management, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Beyond. I think I just want to end by saying, please pay attention to the symptoms that we discussed. If you see them in a relative, please go into your doctor's office. But as I mentioned, starting today, begin doing what you need to do to decrease your risk for dementia. Exercise, eating well, sleeping well, exercising both your physical and your mental body. All of those things are very, very critical. We all can do something to prevent dementia. So let's start today.
Wow, we all can do something to prevent dementia. So let's start today. We want to keep hope alive, and you want to be able to recognize the things that make you happy, the people that you love most, and at least have good memories all the time, and you don't want to lose it. You have it now. So please, let's do what we can to protect what we have so that we cannot lose our memory the way we do not want. And of course, in case you have already lost your memory, or you are losing your memory, or you need somebody, or you're thinking of somebody who is suffering from dementia, there is help for you. So you can always reach out. Thanks so much once again, Menka, for being on the program to talk about this all-important topic. We truly appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Beyond. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and listening.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. Of course, if you join the conversation, I say thank you. For those of us who shared, thank you. Please, let's continue to share, because what's the point of enjoying such educative program but not making it available and accessible for others? So please share the videos, and if you have any questions, you can always get back to us with your questions. But also remember that we had 2 surveys that we will put across, and of course they are in the link. So the before education survey, so please take time to fill that, and after education survey, take time to fill that. And when you do that, we're going to get back to you, and you're going to receive a $25 gift card. Yep, just for filling those survey. And I don't think they take more than 5 minutes. So 5 minutes of your time for $25, and it also helps us to get better information and resources for you for our next conversation. So thanks everybody for being a part of the program, and we truly appreciate your time. The survey links will be posted in the comment box so that you can be able to take a look at. My name is Collins Kofi Opon. Thanks to everybody for joining the production team here at African Let's Talk, led by Ifya, and all the great guys helping to put this together. I say thank you, and you have a good evening. Truly, truly appreciate your time. Show.